Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Life After Dev with Max Baiden. Really pleased to have Max here with us today. Max was one of the first students that I actually advised on his development work placement. I don't know if we should touch on that because he had a tricky one. But welcome, Max. Really appreciate you being here today. The point of these fireside chats is just to find out a bit about what people have done in their careers and whether they can give any advice to our students. So yeah, thank you. Welcome. So 2014, I looked it up. That's when you graduated. I remember now that you were hockey captain when you were at UEA. Have you carried on with the hockey?
Yeah, I do play actually. Yeah, for a local
Yeah.
club where I live. Yeah, we're nearing the end of the season. I'm a bit more of a coach than a player now, though, David. I'm
Okay.
feeling old myself. So
um, well, with that, why don't you give us a quick introduction to what you've done, who you are, what you're doing now, what you've done since graduating in 2014.
yeah, no, God, it's a long time ago. Yeah, so I'm Max Baiden. I'm currently a senior innovation manager at an organization called Results for Development, which is a global INGO. We're fairly, we're relatively sized. We're about 120 people globally. We have a UK innovation arm in London, which I'm part of that team. So I've been here about 18 months, and yeah, my main role is the project director for a frontier tech hub, which is pretty fun actually. We're an FCDO funded program. We've been going for about 10 years. But our role is to sort of be the bridge, I guess, between the international development world and frontier technologies such as artificial intelligence. But we're particularly focused on trialing them in real world settings. So we run lots of pilots around the world, super early stage, and we look at the learning and the research from those pilots and try and move some of them to further scale and impact. So we do lots of weird and wonderful work, which is quite exciting. And obviously, being in the world of AI right now is a very interesting space. Um, so working back to 2014, I was also a project director for a company called Development Alternatives Incorporated before I moved to Results for Development. There, I was running a global biodiversity fund, which was looking at research, kind of the intersection between climate and biodiversity research. So again, sort of building the fund and then operating the modality to offer financing and support to these research institutions globally that were involved in the work. And then I also was part of a team that was setting up an impact fund in southern Nepal, which was focused on SME financing, so small medium enterprise financing in one region in Nepal, and yeah, built some relationships with sort of credit facilities and banks in order to activate the flow of financing to particularly agricultural SMEs in that part of the world. And then I spent 6 years at Save the Children before that. So super interesting organization. 17,000 staff globally. I worked for the UK arm of Save the Children and was in various roles there. So humanitarian operations, humanitarian financing and innovation, a bit of humanitarian policy work, which was super interesting, and then moved more squarely into the entrepreneurship space. So Save the Children at the time was setting up a venture fund. They were looking at financing various innovations around the world with different types of financial support. So not just giving grants, but offering different financial products. And so I was involved in the work that the ventures team was doing, but I was particularly looking at the pipeline to ventures. So how do we build infrastructure and capabilities across Save the Children to bring about an exciting pipeline for investment for the venture fund. And then before that, I was doing some early work for the Department for International Development, as it was then, which feels like a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
So in their early stages of some of their innovation work, particularly on disaster risk financing, I was involved in sort of building and designing programs for them. So yeah, and then even before that, I worked in a sports shop, David, in Norwich, which
In where?
it's no longer there anymore. I think it's called
Oh,
Pilch.
really?
Was it Pilch? Pilchers? Yeah,
Pilch.
yeah,
In Norwich.
yeah. It was part of Gerald's.
Yeah, yeah, Pilch, which,
Yeah,
yeah, I think I got my first Adidas football boots from Pilch.
yeah,
And then, as you said, moved into Janels. Fantastic. I hope it wasn't because of you that it closed down.
yeah.
Um,
Fingers crossed.
uh, Thank you. So you've done quite a lot. You've moved about a lot. And one of the things that I noticed in sort of all your job titles, which I found quite interesting, was what are you now? Innovation program manager, senior, sorry, innovation program manager. And I also saw that you were at an event in Kenya a couple of months ago, which is why I think I reached out to you actually, because I saw that on LinkedIn. And that was called the International Development Innovation Alliance Summit. Now, weirdly, we've got a student event happening on Friday around AI, and it's called the Dev Innovation Summit. And it was students 3 years ago that came up with that title. Why is innovation in what what's this obsession with innovation in people's job titles and careers? Tell me a bit
Yeah,
about
it's a good
that.
question. And I guess it's a bit of a buzzword, really, isn't it? But yeah, I've always sort of seen myself as, I guess, someone that isn't always satisfied with the status quo, I guess. Yeah, someone at Save the Children called me an internal disruptor, which I don't know whether is a good or a bad thing, but yeah, I'm very much keen on sort of pushing the envelope, bringing across new ideas, critiquing what exists, and yeah, I think that's largely meant that I've found myself in spaces where people are trying to do things differently and create impact in different ways. Um, so yeah, the International Development Innovation Alliance Summit. So yeah, IDEA as its acronym is a program that I'm also part of as with Results for Development, and it's a 400 member network now that combines 6 communities of innovators globally. So in that network, we have development agencies, so Foreign Commonwealth Development Office in the UK. We have GIZ, the German Development Corporation. We have the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So big traditional funders of international development globally. We then also have government innovation advisors. So these are the people that are inside government ministries trying to create change and do things differently. So they could be part of the technology ministry or the health ministry, but they're really focused on shifting the norms and creating different types of impact. We have global innovation advisors. So these are technical specialists around the world. We have our partner networks who have multiple membership groups underneath them, such as the Africa Venture Philanthropy Association. We have our training alumni. So IDEA does a big training every year, particularly focused on artificial intelligence at the moment. And then we have our Million Lives Collective, which is an amazing group of entrepreneurs and innovators that are individually impacting 1 million people's lives. Collectively, they support about 1 billion people across the globe. So, these are really innovators, entrepreneurs who have managed to get to scale and are doing things, pretty impressively in terms of the impact they're having, but also the commercial return that they're bringing in their own companies. And so this collective group makes up the alliance, and Idea was 10 years old last year. It decided to bring this group together in Kenya. We had an incredible summit, which looked at the future of urban spaces. It looked at the future of work and what particularly artificial intelligence will mean for the future of jobs. And it also looked at the intersection between climate and health, because, I think traditional development, we're very stuck in our sort of thematic tracks of, health and climate and livelihoods and infrastructure. And actually, we need to find ways of kind of breaking down these silos and bridging kind of cross thematic areas, traditional cross thematic areas. So yeah, it was a really exciting sort of 2-3 day summit that I was glad to curate and be a part of. But I think back to your question, I've always just kind of fallen in these spaces of not trying to do things the same way, and this has landed me with innovation job titles, I guess.
So talk about that. I mean, that is really interesting because, as I said, the summit that we're having on Friday is student led. It was their choice to discuss AI. It's having such a big impact. I mean, I've I've just literally sent out a press release today about some new research that I've got coming out on Friday about AI and how charities are using generative AI in image generation and development organisations as well, UN OCHA, etc. How is it going to affect people's lives? So you're in Nairobi, yeah? How's artificial intelligence going to change people's lives, do you think?
I mean, I think it's going to create quite major shifts. Um, I'm still optimistic that there's going to be a need for this sort of brokering, this human brokering role between artificial intelligence and, the actual job or doing of whatever's needed. But I think we'll see, quite fundamental changes. I'll give you an example. So the Frontier Tech Hub, which I'm director of, we're currently building AI tools within the hub, and particularly at the moment, these tools are designed to support the FCDO to do their work better, essentially, to create more impact and be more efficient in what they do. And we built a tool called Evaluation Explorer, Eval Explorer. And I mean, you'll be familiar with this, David. Like, many programs that are run in development, they do their work, and then an evaluation is written at the end, and it says the program did this, it didn't do this, it could have done this better in the future, and this is our recommendation, right? And a lot of those just get put on a shelf. We don't dig them out very much. I mean, researchers maybe go and look at them, or students, for example, might go and have a look for them occasionally for dissertations, etc. But they're not really being used by the people that would most value them, which is development practitioners or people actually working to design new interventions or new opportunities for people in these places. And so what we've done is we built an AI tool that allows you to very quickly take insights from individual evaluations, but also to synthesize across many evaluations, and it gives you quite rigorous and clear data now, which again would help then to design your strategy or intervention or whatever you're planning to do. So in that sense, we'll still need a human to go ahead and build whatever the intervention is, design the program, collaborate with the right people, build the right partnerships, get the funding. But the speed of which you can get data and insights now is really interesting. On the flip side, we've got a massive problem with misdisinformation. I mean, you'll probably know this in your line of work, but we're currently undertaking 3 or 4 pilots through the Frontier Tech Hub that looks at the challenges and difficulties of understanding what is truth anymore. And I think we'll start to see real difficulties in that space, and obviously we're already seeing it in the political order of what does constitute real, raw, truthful data anymore. And so we're particularly doing some work around truth in election cycles, and what does that look like? Where do you get your right sources from? How does AI fit into that? into that as well. So yeah, I think we'll see quite big shifts in this space. I think, if I was a student now, I'd definitely be learning in the artificial intelligence space. I'd definitely be getting involved in technologies for development because I think, all the trends, both from, the partners that I work with, the people who've got the money currently in development, those that are designing programs, is trending towards artificial intelligence. And there's actually a lot we don't know, huge amounts that we don't know still. And it's also changing very rapidly. So, we built a tool, I think it was about 4 months ago, put it into production after 2 weeks. It was outdated within, 3 weeks.
Really?
So I think as well, you're just going to see very fast paced movement of work. And yeah, I think the job market will look fundamentally different in sort of 5, 6, 7 years time.
So, I mean, that's quite interesting on many levels. Number one, because I'm employability director again, I can't remember if I was when you were around. I don't think I was. I think Danny was. But I've been asked to do it again. I'm also in charge of postgraduate admissions. So I'm always looking at what courses, what skills is it that practitioners need these days. Hence, doing this series of fireside chats. One of the things that we're thinking of doing is an MA digital development. Do you think that that's a sensible thing to do? You're saying that people need these skills, but what if they were to do an MA digital development? What skills do practitioners need these days? I mean, is it Python that they need, or is it knowledge around the capabilities of AI? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't build a course that's about sort of coding or directly building tools, but I think I'm seeing the need for people that can interpret, translate, be bridges between quite complex worlds of fast-paced moving technology, particularly AI, and kind of traditional old school development work, which I think will phase out over time. I don't think the development landscape will look the same in 10 years' time as it does now. I mean, we've already seen it change from when I graduated in 2014, when we were going through a boom in development, really, to now where we're going through significant cuts and defense spending's on the rise, and the UN is not a peace and security organization as it once was, that's sort of holding together the global order. So I think we will see shifts in the landscape, but what I'm continuously seeing the need for, and that dates back to 2014 as well, is people that can oscillate between several worlds and can speak coherently to different types of actors and bridge partnerships and collaborations, including unexpected ones. We at Results for Development, we've certainly had to upskill ourselves in the sort of technology, artificial intelligence landscape, not from the view that we'll ever deploy, artificial intelligence tools. There'll always be someone else better to do that role. But actually, my job in particular is better understanding them. How do they work? Who would use them? What's the audience? How would it create value? How would it create impact on a person in, Rwanda or Nigeria or the UK or the US or wherever it is, and be able to then look for opportunities, synergies, challenges, risks, and such. So, yeah, there's a really interesting article just came out in the Harvard Business Review that talked about this need to be sort of bridges between worlds, and I really think that's the space to play in. I think also with something like digital development is alongside the exponential rise in frontier technology and artificial intelligence and that world, there's still the core fundamentals of many people just don't have access.
Yeah.
We've got people, we've got farmers in rural parts of Africa who are, yes, on mobile phones, but might not have the digital literacy that, say, we do in other parts of the globe. So there's this kind of weird sense that we're in a growing sort of digital inequality space, and that we will need actors that can, work across the spectrum of fast-paced, moving frontier technology and, really kind of basic digital infrastructure that will support, the majority of populations.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading. I was just looking to see if it was on my desk, but I think I've taken it into the other room. A new book that's come out about sort of the empire of AI. I can't remember the exact title, by Rachel Adams, I think, and it's fascinating. And that's her fear, and she's worked here in the UK, but also a lot in South Africa, and is involved in sort of very high policy levels, and that digital divide is just going to extend, isn't it? If people haven't got access to a phone or a computer or even electricity in the first place, the rich are going to get richer, the poor are going to get poorer. And one of the things I was speaking to people in Nairobi, because Nairobi is apparently well known as, sort of almost having AI factories where people are just checking content, uploading content, and paid an absolute pittance. So yeah, I think it's an interesting time ahead. Um, but you think there's a market in MA digital development then, Max? Can I sell you one?
I mean, you could try. Yeah, I think it's also interesting, like the shifts in kind of the global working landscape as well. Like I think you're seeing a trend of um, where sort of China, India was maybe sort of 10, 15, 20 years ago is actually shifting to parts of Africa, where there is a kind of lower cost of employment, which again, I wouldn't advocate for, but I think it's just interesting to see the trends that are happening globally. And I'll have to dig out that there's a great article somewhere around sort of the political shifts in kind of the age of technology that we're in now. And she painted a really interesting picture around sort of where China was and where Africa looks like it's, as a continent, Africa is looking like it's going at the moment. But yeah, I just would, yeah, I would say to anyone sort of in this world to to really kind of understand, upskill themselves in the digital space. But actually, David, a question for you: like, what are you seeing in the media landscape? Are you because obviously I know you from sort of your Devon sort of media crossovers. Are you seeing that sort of age of misinformation? How are you finding truth in all of this? How does impact also in development intersect with this? Because I think it's becoming much easier now to tell a narrative of impact rather than the truth of impact. And are you seeing that across your work as well?
Yeah, I mean that's a bit of what our research is about. So in one of the COVID years, 2020, I think, because I was stuck in the house, I'd always wanted to look at imagery and in sort of newspaper ads for charities and development organizations, etc. So I collected every single newspaper. I also started donating to uh, different charities to see what they would send me via direct mail, what they would send me via email, what text they'd send me, etc. And it was quite a big beast. And we analysed all of the newspaper ads, we analysed all of the direct mail. I never got around to the email stuff, and so that sort of died of death a bit. And then AI came along, and Deborah, who was doing the MA Global Development, which Median Global Development, sorry, which Juan is doing, she was really, really interested. And so we've worked on these projects together, and that's why we decided to look at sort of AI. So there's 17 organizations that we can find that have used AI in their imagery. But what's interesting there, so you're talking about the truth, is I think it's 84% have been honest about it and clearly labeled it as AI. But that leaves 16% that haven't. So how many images are there out there that we don't know about that are being used by large NGOs, development organizations, or smaller charities because it's more affordable. And so what we did is we analysed the comments. So when people were honest about it, and some were doing it as a test. There's an organisation in the UK called Charity Right, and they published some images that were real, and some images which were generated by AI, and then they tested them on Reddit. So there was discussions on Reddit. Charity Water put some images up on LinkedIn. WWF have used it. WWF Denmark. Some really interesting ways as well. I mean, my wife is a fine art academic, and one of I think it was WWF. I don't want to get this wrong. I think it was WWF. They were talking about climate change through some of the old sort of masters paintings. But projecting into the future, what will Bradford look like in the style of a Constable? Well, it wasn't Constable, but that kind of thing. So there's quite inventive stuff that you can do by looking into the future. But equally, some people are just producing, the old stereotypical poverty porn type images. So what happens to trust? What happens to authenticity? And that's the same with the media, with any media story. But, one of the things that I'll be discussing on Friday when we launch the report is BBC have got an AI week this week. I can't remember what it's called. All sorts of programs on Radio 4, Radio 3, on TV, on the website. And one of the things that they've done is they've got all these stories, but they want to bring them to life. And so they're using AI to tell stories that they'd gathered data for, and they're in the written word, but they now want to visualize them. So the first one that they've launched is the history of the Labradoodle. So the Labradoodle was apparently born in Australia 34 years ago, and they'd written this whole story, but now they've animated it. And I'm like, well, that's actually quite a cool way to tell a story. So maybe in the future, if people have got case studies, our students are currently working on a project with an organization around, survivors. And so there's obviously, so with the organization Freedom from Torture, and obviously there's all sorts of ethical considerations that you have to think about when using images of survivors, and so they want us to think about ways that you could depict people, whether it's just audio or whether it's images, and lots of people have experimented with different ways. Is AI a solution? It is a solution. It is, because you can obviously anonymize a story, but then you'll get the backlash that this isn't a real person. But then if it was a real person, you've got the ethical considerations there, right? Etc. So but my kids are 17 and 19 now, and my wife will look at Instagram to wind down from a day's teaching, and she'll start laughing at something and say, I can't believe that this dog did it. And the girls are going, Mum, it's AI.
Yeah, it's not real.
And it is so sophisticated now. I mean, I've just subscribed to Nano Banana, and or whatever it's called, a silly name, I think. But it is unbelievable. The prompts that you put in to get the imagery that in other tools a couple of years ago, it blows them away.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
It's totally mad.
I was thinking about so on the Frontier Tech Hub, we run future tech immersions with teams around the world working on kind of development challenges, and they're called Field Trip to the Futures. And we have a kind of a team that's able to sort of vibe code now, and you can do things on open source software like GitHub, and create all sorts of things like chatbots and dashboards and web flows. And yeah, we I'm not sort of directly involved in the technical work, but the team came to me the other day to say, the British Embassy in Kathmandu are really interested in doing a field trip with us that would look at kind of misdisinformation around an election cycle. And they created this whole story. It was sort of 20 minutes long, where you were transported to the future. You've got this sort of futuristic dashboard that someone's come up with their imagination, but it's clearly like fed it through the sort of AI machine in order to produce this incredible immersive experience where
Yeah.
you were sort of making decisions as someone that was sort of involved in the team of like, should I intervene, should I let it play out, should I make decision A, B, C, or D? And then you got all the kind of follow up and impact of what your decisions were. And for me, I think that's great. Like for a strategic team based in Nepal that are going through lots of climate challenges at the moment, have obviously got some cross border issues. Have got a fairly youthful workforce, but it's changing rapidly. A very disaster, quite natural disaster stricken area as well. And has obviously gone through some quite interesting election cycles recently. Has got kind of an interesting political dynamic where you've got quite a strong central political party, and then you've got sort of diversity across the regions. This was a really interesting session for them to actually be like, okay, well, where should we operate in this space? What's our mandate in relation to kind of crisis management in election cycles? And yeah, I think for stuff like that, it's super exciting that the team were able to build this in sort of 2 weeks, this sort of
Yeah.
story, and then deploy it. Whereas before, like our training cycles for those teams could have been 6 months, a year, 18 months of
Really.
development and then deployment. So yeah, I think the speed of it is
Yeah.
quite exciting, and obviously the ability for it to do stuff where it would take humans a lot longer. The bit
Yeah.
that I'm slightly cautious, nervous about is like, yeah, how much truth is actually in this? Like, where's the sort of validity of the sources? Has it been verified? Is it is it true? Like in your case, are these organizations actually doing this work, or have they managed to sort of manufacture a narrative that tells a story? And so, yeah, I think we're going to see lots of that as well. Is our own personal dissection of truth, but what does it mean for the wider development landscape? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it's sort of exciting and scary all at the same time, isn't it? And one of the things I want to explore is co-creation of imagery, because that's been happening a lot in the charity and development sector anyway. Working with participatory photography, but sometimes the co-creation with a professional photographer, and having local people almost becoming the director. But then you've got that whole ethical debate of whose image is that? Is it the directors or is it the photographers? Is it, so can you have co-creation with an AI artist? Oh, yeah. Anyway, that's wow, Max. I think we could just run on all day, couldn't we? But I appreciate you're a busy person, so
You're all good.
I'm gonna ask one final question, which would be, if you were an undergrad again, um, what what piece of advice would you give to your third year self as an undergrad? What would you do in that final year to sort of equip yourself for the future that you've had? Use use AI to ask it.
Yeah, probably. No, it's a really good question. I mean, I think um, we're probably seeing a world which is more built around sort of relationships and networks than ever before. So I'd really be putting myself out there in sort of spaces that I'm fascinated by, and trying to build a broad connection base that would enable that. I think this is a time in your life where you get to sort of, I don't know, determine where you're most excited. And I would just go and dive into those spaces. For me at the time, it was around volunteer tourism. Like I was fascinated by the sort of juxtaposition of like you can, be a volunteer and go to these wonderful places, but are you taking away from a paid job, or are you going over there as sort of as a white savior? And that was super interesting for me in those
That
days.
was your dissertation, Max.
That was indeed, yeah. And yeah, I went into kind of ethical tourism for about 6 months before I moved into the more formal development space. So yeah, I think just go and explore something you're excited in. I think keep an eye on the trends that are happening globally, and yeah, make sure you kind of up to date with them. But yeah, networks and relationships are massive for me. I mean, I've managed to sort of weave my way through my career based on knowing really smart, capable, awesome people, and it's helped me to to navigate certain spaces and to find roles that excite me. I mean, I'll give you an example. At Save the Children, I was in working in humanitarian operations, and it was very old school. I didn't like it. It was lots of sort of administrative work, Excel spreadsheets, and yeah, I just it was just a pain to me. It didn't help my creative brain at all. And there was a lady there who was building her own startup basically inside Save the Children. She'd been given a bit of a mandate. She worked in the emergency cash space, and she was looking at how do we get 70% of the last mile emergency cash, which is given to families in times of crises, is distributed by 14 organizations, and they're all NGOs. And she was like, well, why is therefore it, so inefficient? It does, it's a bit of a broken system. There's NGOs that are providing double amounts of cash to some families. There's no kind of data transfer between organizations in terms of where they're working or how they're operating. She was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And she started building this approach to actually formalizing a relationship, a collaboration between these 14 INGOs. And yeah, she sort of asked me to be a part of that journey. I sort of started doing it off the side of my desk. It wasn't really my job, but I was like, well, I'm keen on this. I'm going to go, work a couple of hours in the evening to see if I can be part of this. And after sort of 3-4 months, she was like, we're building enough momentum that I want to offer you a role. And, therefore I got a role into this startup. I went out to Ethiopia to build the franchise out there. And, I was 24 at the time. I was pretty young still. And, I was dropped into Ethiopia, like, yeah, go and make this work. And I learned so much from that experience. And I'm actually doing a bit of work with a group of funders in Kenya at the moment that are trying to do a similar thing, sort of come together around where they make their investments into impactful organizations in Kenya. And I'm taking so much from that experience in Ethiopia and bringing it to Kenya. So I would also say that where you can spare bits of time, and I know when I was a student, I did have occasional bits of spare time that I would probably use for things other than doing development work. But if you do create the right networks, find the right people, and land something you're passionate with, go and explore it for a little bit, because you don't know what doors it might open up. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. Yeah, that's probably the similar advice that I'd give it to people as well. I was when I did the Belbin studies back at university, I was a resource investigator, which was basically someone nosy who used to ask everybody things. Juan, have you got any questions for Max while he's here? We've got him for another 10 minutes or so if we
Yeah,
want to.
well,
Yeah.
probably I'm going to just make one quick one. You mentioned that you suggest to be up to date in all the trends about like the development field, and I'm wondering like right now the humanitarian sector and the development sector is like facing kind of a crisis of funds, and I maybe want to know like what are the trends of like funding projects, or what are the objectives of the funders right now? To what are they looking at, and what it's attractive for example, as donor, what is attractive for them to, yeah, like invest or create projects, fund projects.
Good
Yeah,
question. Where's the money, Max?
Yeah.
money. I'm still asking myself that question. Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. So yeah, we're all aware that, obviously the events that are happening at the moment, which is absolutely mind-boggling. But there's going to be a big move towards, and there already is, towards increased defense spending, right? And countries are looking more inwardly at their own sort of internal defense capabilities rather outwardly in terms of supporting global impact. Same in the climate change space, right? Like we know that sadly one global leader in particular is eradicating climate change extremely fast. I mean, my take on it is that traditional old school donors are, I guess, sort of focusing in three places, I would say. So one is, there's still the lens of sort of, humanitarian response, and I don't think that will change. So I still think that whilst it will probably diminish in terms of overall volume of funding, I think there will still always be a part of development work that will be focused on responding to humanitarian crises. I think the second one that I'm seeing is like a shift towards an investor, in terms of like the way that old school traditional donors are viewing their money. So they want to see return on investment, and whether that means a financial return through different types of innovative products, or a social return that they can quantify. That's becoming more apparent. They want to get more bang for their buck, and that could mean that their investment in a project or a venture becomes catalytic. So they want to see that what they've put in has, increased exponentially over a period of time, or that it crowds in more partnerships, or other types of relationships that move it towards scale. And then the third trend I'm seeing is kind of big drivers for operational efficiency within their own organizations, which is therefore saving them money to spend in places where they feel it's really valued. And this is where the artificial intelligence argument comes back in again, because being able to use AI tooling and create operational efficiencies means that there's quite a bit of money and spend going on in that space in order to reduce kind of their overall costs, and therefore be able to spend money in places where they deem it valuable. So I mean, I think we're probably still in the early stages of the shifting kind of funding landscape. I think we're seeing that generally philanthropy is becoming a bigger player in the sector. You see someone like the Gates Foundation who's looking to spend down all their funds by 2040, I think it is. They're spending at a crazy rate, because that's the mandate that they've been given by Bill Gates. So I think we will see sort of shifts in that space. I don't think the private sector is being leveraged enough. I think there's still, I mean, I think so. I presume people know about blended finance, but the idea of blended finance is that you combine both sort of non-commercial capital like grant funding with more commercial capital. And there's quite a lot of commentary to say that hasn't worked. It's sort of dead. It's not gone far enough. But I still think there's an argument for an interpretation of blended finance. I think the bit that we haven't done so well is got the incentives right for the private sector. I think we've made it very much about like the public sector and the money that kind of non-commercial funding brings, and the private sector are going to come in and save us, and they're going to bring all their money, but we haven't given them the incentive or the reasoning why they should come on this journey. We've not been strong enough on the sort of business argument for them coming in. And I think if we can make that stronger, then I think you're more likely to see, the flow of funds come from the private capital into the impact space. So yeah, I don't know for me if it's, I mean, obviously we've seen USAID, has disappeared. That was, a huge amount of funding in the traditional development sector. But I slightly argue more on the arm of it's not the amount of funding we need. It's more that we need, the funding to be accessible and accessible from the right places. And I think if we deploy it and use it better, which is why I'm so interested in entrepreneurship, because there is sort of a return on capital that you can reinvest. I think more if we deploy it well, if we get the right returns, if we invest in the right places, I think you could see, significant gains for the development community at large. So yeah, I think it's definitely a changing world. I think you'll see old school development funders diminish in terms of their ability to finance. I think they've still got a power or some sort of leverage within the sector, because if you come with a name like the FCDO to a particular conversation or with government, they're still going to listen to you because it has an attachment of funding or prestige or kind of history with it. But yeah, they're worried. They're like, oh, our world's going to change. We're not the big financer in the sector anymore. We're kind of a smaller fish in a biggish pond.
There you go, Juan. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Max.
Fantastic. Max, once again, thank you so much. I've certainly learned a lot today. Found it really, really, really interesting. So let's hope some students sign on and find it interesting too. We'll start promoting it after this. So yeah, thanks again. Maybe we can